Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Julie. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first licensing committee after lockdown on Wednesday, the 21st of July. And I'd like to say thank you all for being here. Could we please confirm the minutes of the last meeting held on the 21st of October? Is everybody in agreement? Thank you. And Julie, do we have any apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from
Julie, do you need me on speaker?
Chairman, I'll read the apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Bowles, Mr. Brindle, Mr. Carter, Mr. Coleman, Mrs. Dowling, Miss Taylor. That's it on the list. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. I do apologise, everybody. We seem to be having a few IT hiccups here, and we'll move on to urgent business. I don't have any urgent business. Do you, Josie? No? Declarations of interest. Does anybody have any declarations of interests? No? Non-members wishing to address the meeting. We have Alan Goodall here, and we will move on to item 6, which is introduction to the Animal Welfare Licensing Officer, Alan Goodall. I'd just like to say, members, that Alan will give his presentation and Josie will answer any questions that you have due to the amount of work that Alan has on and the excellent job that he's doing for the council. It's important that he gets back into the field as soon as possible. There'll be other opportunities to talk to him, and I'm sure you all understand. Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan. That was an excellent presentation and a very, very small précis, I know, of what you do. It was funny you should mention alpacas actually, because I remember a keeper of alpacas locally who was a Brecon Council Award winner for one of the awards we were putting out. And the leader wanted to bring them into the chamber to make the award, but wasn't allowed to. So he had to go out to the car park to do it. So committee, would you like to ask any questions, Alan?
Yes, Madam Chairman. Right, I'm a dog breeder, got a license for 20 dogs. Suddenly have 200 dogs on the site. What legal powers have you got to enter that site?
Your license?
Yeah,
Okay, so I can come, we have a power to come onto the site as part of an inspection. So if you're licensed, I can come onto the site. I can't, if it's your house, I can't come into your house. But if it's a commercial premises, I can come onto the commercial premises without a warrant. However, if I suspected poor animal welfare, I would get a warrant. But I can come on to the commercial part of your business without a warrant. I'm also the business as a check over. But effectively, if I don't suspect any problems, I probably say, look, coming on. I'm guessing that you're a license holder.
I'm not. That's
Oh, sorry.
no. I've been on this committee. I've been on this.
Theoretically,
Yeah, I've been on this committee a long while, and there is a lady not too many miles away from here, has 2 farms, as far as I know. She didn't have a license. That made the papers where the RSPCA managed to get rid of 200 dogs, but not one of hers. They were all the ones from their rescue, but they used that as an excuse, and the story in the paper. But the previous dog warden was refused entry. That was why my question onto the site.
The power, our actual powers are really only invoked, sir, when there is a license on the premises. There isn't a license. I actually thought you were a dog. The actual powers are invoked when we have a license. We have to go to the police if we need a warrant, things like that. It's not a problem, you know, it's fairly straightforward, but it's a lot of work. It's probably still on.
I believe I know the case that you're talking about. It was prior to the 2018 regulations coming in. Yeah, I would say if you have any intel on that kind of thing, Alan is the person that you need to speak to let him know.
Alan, what do you do in a situation like that? What would you do with the dogs that you seized, in effect?
There's all sorts of places we can take.
Keith?
Thank you, Alan. You touched on Jollies, who are pet food and pet store. They sell sort of rabbits and things,
They
but,
do, sir,
but they still want a license for that, do they?
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
I
they do.
was really pleased with Jollies. They've done a lot of work over the last year. I think Jolie went round
Could it? Sorry. go on.
Thank you. Yes, I suppose I'm very pleased to hear the compliance work you're getting, and I understand that's a route to follow, but which ways do you think will be most effective after a period of time? Is it pursuing people who are not complying and having that come out in public, which would encourage more people to get licenses?
That's
And-
that's the ideal. There are some active investigations running at the moment, and I think that's something consider, and we decide where it's going to go. Rest assured that if there's a prosecution and there's a conviction, then I'll be working with comms, get that message out there, and I'll also take that mainstream and get much immediate volume is a challenge. Everybody in this outside this would know that dog breeding is on the truth. If you go back to awards, type in dog breeding near me, and you can't find one of those that's actually got a record district. That's the challenge. So it's, as I said, the rule of thumb in the police is always best evidence of the worst. And we would go for one that really was. But they're fairly straightforward cases. They just take a little bit of time. Media-wise, we will be going very, very. That's why we're working.
Good, thank you. Could I ask one of the, it hits the press sometimes, sort of exotic animals, almost illegal ones. Are we seeing any evidence of that?
You have to have a license. There's animals called dangerous wild animals, and you have to have. You don't have to have a permit to sell them, but you do have to have a permit to own one. You talk things like certain birds of prey, crocodiles, all those sorts of things. And the government license regime for that isn't down to us, but it's something that I know a little bit about. So obviously, if I hear one, I just have to check that the permits are there for that. Whatever government.
Yeah, just a question. If you go into a premises and you get the dogs removed and put into kennels, who's paying for them? Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's the dogs. If you see the great deal of dogs, it can be that they remain as evidence for a long time, and obviously a decision would be made.
Right, committee. Well, thank you very much indeed, Alan.
Thank you.
I know you've got a very heavy workload today, and so if everybody's content, we'll let you go and say thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, and cheerio for now. Right, item number 7, it's consideration of a draft revised taxi policy and procedures. It's the report of Craig Fowler, and it's very long, and I'm going to hand it over to Josie.
Thank you, Chairman. You're absolutely correct. It is a large document. I hope everybody has had the chance to read it. It was brought about by the Department for Transport coming out with a new set of statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards in July 2020. They have come up with what they believe are good standards to basically require the entire nation in England to adopt, every council to adopt. So we had a very good look at this within the team, and then I took the document away and came up with the table of standards that was part of today's agenda. Basically, because this was to enable me to see what changes needed to be made or what the DFT were asking for. So I came up with this document. I'm going to sort of whiz through it fairly quickly to mainly point out there are a couple of bits that I've proposed we do not adopt that are part of the DFT statutory standards. And I'll explain the reasons why and leave you to come to your conclusions as to whether you think we need to change that or not, if that's okay, Chairman. So in the main, we have adopted or we're already doing most of the things. So the review of the policy, that will be done every 5 years now. It was last undertaken in 2006-07. There have been amendments over the intervening years, but this is the largest review of the policy that's taken place for quite some considerable time. So as I say, we will be doing that every 5 years. I think the proposal is to do that on a more regular basis. The current review proposed document is actually more to do with these statutory DFT standards and does not include many changes to vehicle specifications. We've tried to keep that as it is for now, and we'll look at that, review that next year when the trade has had some time to recover before we start to introduce newer vehicles with less emissions, that type of thing. So this mainly affects the conditions on the license for drivers and operators currently. So the two main things to take into account are 4.5, the continuous subscription to DBS online update service. We currently advise license holders to sign to the DBS update service, but it's not a requirement. And the reason for this is it does make it easier for them when they come to do their renewals. The DBS service have actually asked for that under what I've termed as 6.2, so that we would be able to do a 6-monthly check. I personally don't think that that's necessary. I've been working in the licensing team since 2006, and I don't think a 6-monthly check will actually help us in any way. I think it's excessive given the conditions that we've already put on the license within this new document. So if anybody were to get a change in medical circumstances or specifically to do with the DPS, the new terms would be that if they were arrested, charged, convicted, cautioned, so pretty much the entire remit from the time you might get picked up, they would actually have to notify us, which is actually more information than we would get off a DBS certificate anyhow. A DBS certificate is very good. It tells us all about people who've been caught, but it only gives us information that's actually being recorded. So if somebody hasn't been actually, they may have been arrested at that point, but it wouldn't show on the DBS certificate. So I think our new self-declaration is actually more appropriate at this stage. Obviously happy to review that as we go on. And if we feel that actually it is causing an issue, we could change that going forward. And the other part was the language proficiency and doing an English and what's the word I'm looking for? It's gone. Knowledge test, sorry. Again, we haven't, in my years of being here, actually experienced any issues with language proficiency. We're obviously quite fortunate that English is their first language currently. Again, happy to keep that under review, but didn't want to burden existing and new drivers currently with having an English test. I think it's something that officers can make a judgment call on when they're interviewing new candidates for drivers. And I think rather than imposing an English language test on them and a knowledge test on them, I hope you're happy that we'll just carry on reviewing that and come back to you if we think that needs to change. We haven't had any complaints about people getting them lost when they're driving them around. So I don't think there's a need for a knowledge test, but it's just to make you aware that there are a couple of things in the DFT document that they've said should be a standard that I personally, and it is my personal opinion, think that we possibly don't need right now. So would you like to comment on that?
Could we have it as an option where if you chose to require a test, an English test, you could do that?
I don't think we could put it in a policy as an option because the policy is basically stating conditions. I do think it's going to come down to officer discretion. And if they did believe that there was a need for English to become an English test to be had, then we would have to review that. That would then be something that we could bring to committee and actually bring the applicant to a panel to explain that we think that, you know, possibly they do need to do an English test. But I think for the moment, it would be very difficult to put it in the policy as an either or. I think it either has to be one thing or the other at the moment. But that's why I would like to keep reviewing it. If we're reviewing the policy on a more regular basis, I think we can keep reviewing it and just see, because we don't know what's going to happen with the mix of society outside. Things could change. It's stayed this way for quite some time, but it could change imminently, who knows? So I think to keep it under review is definitely the sensible approach if you're happy with that. So they are the two main things that I veered away from on the DFT standards, and I hope you understand the reasons why. We're trying to make this level and fair for all of the taxi drivers, but there have been some significant changes in the way that the policy and procedures document actually looks. So I've tried to combine everything in this one document, because previously we had two conditions booklets, one if you were a private hire driver and one if you were a Hackney carriage driver. You had to keep those in your vehicles, you had to know what all of those conditions were, and then we had a standalone policy document that we in the team used and the committee used, and drivers knew it was there but didn't really know what it contained until they came to committee for some reason. So from my perspective and from the driver's perspective, I thought it was a much better idea to have just the one document where everything was entered into it, and it makes it clear for everybody. We'll all be singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. So the main changes are within the actual policy document itself, that we've separated out and actually included everything that's part of the application process and the renewal process. There's information in there on the determination of applications, how to do a replacement vehicle, transfer of an existing licensed vehicle, and then I've amalgamated all of the specifications applicable to all vehicles. They do state obviously which vehicles they're applicable to, but it's just one section, again, just to make it easier. And the only thing that's been added to that is some information on hybrid and electric vehicles, because that wasn't in the current policy for obvious reasons. We've included a small section on the immediate revocation procedure. Section 9, the diabetes policy, is a new policy. Previously, we used to bring anybody that had type 1 diabetes to committee, to a panel at the stage of them either getting diabetes if they were existing drivers or if they were a new driver at that stage. What we would like to do is have this diabetes policy so that we don't have to bother you to just add those conditions on if they meet the requirements of that diabetes policy. So going forward, if this was all agreed when it goes out to consultation and everything and you're happy, then anybody coming to us with type 2 or type 1 diabetes that meets that policy criteria would automatically be given those conditions on their license by the officer granting the license. I think that's fairly straightforward. Does anybody have any questions about the diabetes policy? Okay, and then the next section is section 10, the NR3 register, which is the NAFN database of refusals and revocations. So we're not currently signed up to that. Again, it's a recommendation that's come through from DEFRA. Sorry, not DEFRA, the Department for Transport. And they're trying to get every local authority in the nation signed up to this. It's ultimately very sensible because it means that if we refuse or revoke any licenses, driver's licenses, taxi licenses, we have to notify NAFN. We would also then do any new applicants or anybody renewing, we would also do a check on that database. There are some unscrupulous people out there who have a license in one authority, basically do something naughty and then get hauled in front of the committee or the panel to potentially have their license revoked. And in the meantime, in that interim period, apply to a neighbouring authority for a license. Although it won't stop that, the statutory declaration that we are amending on our application form will say, do you currently have any matters outstanding if you hold a badge somewhere else? So we're trying to cover it off in both, but by checking the NR3 register, we'll be able to see whether they've had a license refused or revoked at another authority. So it makes sense for every authority in the land to sign up to it, and we need to do it.
So we will be signing up to it then, Josie.
That's certainly the plan if this policy goes through. We've added a little bit to the complaints procedure, and we're going to make that easier for members of the public to make complaints by having a complaints web form on the website, so that they don't have to phone in and speak to the contact centre. They will be able to do it directly themselves. So there's a little bit about the complaints procedure. It also explains that there are some things we can investigate and some things that actually sit with the police. So there's a little bit in there about that. And then Appendix A is the Code of Good Conduct for licensed drivers. Now, this did exist previously. It wasn't in the policy. It had been done separately by a colleague of mine back in 2015, and was basically at that point just around the safeguarding matters. We have beefed that up, and it now has a dress code and that type of thing in it. So it's a lot more beefed up than it was previously. Things like respecting customers and other drivers and other road users, all of that kind of thing has been introduced into the Code of Conduct. So it is relatively new. We've kept obviously the safeguarding issues in there. We had a lot of requests for a dress code to smarten the trade up, basically. So that's the reason that's gone in there. And that also mentions the annual self-declaration, because we have to put that in to make sure that it's part of the policy procedures. The intended use policy is also new. I'm sorry, this is probably quite dry. There's a lot in it, but the intended use policy is new. The reason for introducing the intended use policy is to put the onus on the applicant to show that they are going to be working or mainly working in the Breckland area to safeguard the jobs of the Breckland taxi private hire trade. What we don't want is a lot of people applying to us because we might have a slightly cheaper license, or it might be easier to get one from us, applying from elsewhere in the country and then using that license elsewhere and not being here for the Breckland public to be able to use them. So it's to try and safeguard that. So the onus will be on the applicant and anybody taking on a transfer of a vehicle, that type of thing, to actually show the intended use, that they're actually going to be operating in the Breckland area. So I hope you agree that's quite a good introduction. The convictions policy has been incredibly beefed up from what we had previously. And again, most of those recommendations come from the Department for Transport. There is a section at the back of the table of standards that actually says which of those we have taken, and we have taken on everything that the DFT have asked for in those convictions policies. And then there is, where are we, 4.42, the IOL motoring offences. We have kept the IOL other motoring offences because they weren't included as part of the DFT convictions policy. So we've added those in as well. And again, they're listed on page 151 and 152 of the agenda. The rest of it is pretty much stayed the same. So the only change to the rest of those things are the private hire vehicle proprietor conditions. And again, they stem from the Department for Transport recommendations, their standards, in that operators will need to do a basic level DBS on any staff who take telephone calls, record data and dispatch vehicles. So that's something new. They haven't had to keep those records before and do those checks. If that person were to stop working for them for a 6-month period and then come back, they would then have to have a new DBS certificate done to basic level. And they need to keep records of those. They have to keep a register, a live register of anybody working for them to say they have checked those, and we will be doing checks on those. The records have been slightly beefed up in there as well, as to what the operators need to keep. And yeah, that's basically it on the operator things. And the rest of it has really stayed the same. Limousine conditions, private hire and Hackney carriage vehicle conditions have stayed the same. The penalty point system was already in existence, but hadn't been used by the team since it came into effect in 2007. We'd like to keep it and actually start using it. And this is for what I consider to be minor breaches. So it'll be things like not wearing your badge when we come and do an inspection on the rank, not having your stickers displayed, not being with your vehicle when it's on the rank. Those types of things, they're all listed in that section. And it's basically a 3 strikes and you're at committee policy. So you'll get 9 points through this penalty points system within a 3-year period. If you get those 9 points, you're before committee because you've had those 3 breaches. And we consider that, you know, if you've been told you need to be wearing your badge and you're not wearing it for a second time, then actually, you know, there's an onus on you to be fit and proper and actually do your job properly. So we think that 3 strikes and you're at committee is quite a sensible approach. So they're the main changes. Obviously, it is quite a large document. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but if you have got any questions on it, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, I would just like to thank the officers involved in compiling this. Being a professional taxi driver in London myself, as my sort of #1 job, I can really see you've put a lot of effort into this and you've brought this policy up to a really good standard that's going to reflect good service to the public, but also a standard for the drivers to keep. So I think it's pretty clear and comprehensive and it's very well done. I can't see anything in there that isn't compliable with. So I want to thank you. I think that's really good. It's bringing Breckland up to a good standard of service.
Any other questions? Linda?
I don't remember how to use this thing. I had one query regarding the NR3, if I can find it. Around about page 50 on the of the agenda, it definitely says information obtained through an NR3 request will only be kept for 35 days unless there's an appeal. When you get to page 51, it says Breckland will keep clear records of searches for 25 years. How do you reconcile those two? Is there a difference that I haven't spotted? Because I didn't understand that.
I hadn't looked at that myself, I have to confess. So it's on page 50 and 51. Yeah. It's the bottom one. Yeah, this record will not be combined with any other records, i.e. combined with the register of licenses granted and will be retained for the retention period of 25 years. I will get that amended and seek legal advice on that because I think it should be the 35 days, but I will get that. This has been taken from a standard NR3 document, so I will certainly get legal advice on that before we do anything, but thank you for pointing that out. Certainly.
Right, thank you very much, Josie. Now, committee. Sorry, Philip.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to ask about the emissions policy. You decided not to take the DFT advice, which I find disappointing because I think as a minimum, we should be doing that. And I'd just like to expand really on your thoughts why, because the evidence for climate change is all around us and we've adopted a policy recognising that. I think we should be at least following the guidance from the department.
Thank you for that, Councillor. The DFT document doesn't actually go into climate change or any of the changes for vehicles currently, other than we should be looking at whether we have disability vehicles. So the reason we haven't done that is because the trade has been heavily hit. We have seen a massive drop in the number of drivers and vehicles available during the COVID period. The last thing we wanted to do at the moment was to hit them with having to go and get brand new vehicles, because a lot of the fleet currently are older vehicles. We haven't had an issue with disability vehicles. We seem to have enough on the books. We've not received any complaints from the disability agencies or charities to say that there's an issue. We certainly haven't received any complaints from individuals to say they haven't been able to get a disability vehicle at the moment. So the idea behind waiting until next year is to give the trade time to recover from the COVID period and to then look at the Breckland policy on climate change and those implementations that the council wants to make alongside and work with them alongside what we can do to implement that with the taxi fleet going forward. So that was the main reason for doing it, was that we felt that we have to give them time to recover.
Philip, thank you for that. I was, sorry? Oh, you're going on, are you?
Hopefully for not too long. I would just go and remind myself, but I thought there were emission standards that the government, it wasn't talking about climate change, but it did have emission standards. And yes, of course, I'm sympathetic to people who've gone through a rough time. I'd have hoped they've been able to pick up some compensation for their loss of business. Okay, if they haven't, that's rough. I'd have to go away and think about that, but I'm disappointed that we're not giving the right message as I see it.
Thank you, Philip. We had actually spoken about this as the policy has been going through over the years. And we are talking about new vehicles here. And in the respect of the fact that Josie and the team will be keeping their eye on this, I think one of the things is that we're very lucky that we live in Breckland, which has relative clean air, and we're not in a city, although we do have 5 market towns. But I honestly do agree with the fact that to put this into the policy and actually put pressure on our drivers to have to replace their vehicles within a year or 2 years is really good. You know, we are talking about people's jobs here, and their living. And if they can't afford to replace their current older vehicle with one that meets the emission standards, then they're going to find themselves out of a job. And I don't think it's something that the council would like to do, but it's something that will be looked at, Philip, as things go forward and see how the recovery takes place. Is that all right?
I don't know if it helps, but to give you some reassurance, obviously we are on board with the government's climate change for 2030, and the anticipation is we're only at 2021 currently, so we think we still have enough time to make sure that we're implementing those changes with the taxi fleet before 2030 comes about. It just enables, as we said, it just enables a little bit more time in order to be able to do that. And as the council hasn't actually fully set what they want to do with vehicles in the district yet, we think it's an ideal opportunity to work with that team and actually implement it with our taxi trade at the same time. So it's that whole rounded thing really, is we are going to get there and we intend to do it next year, but we just want to take that time to give the trade time to recover. So it's not off the radar, it's definitely there and was definitely coming.
Thank you, Philip, for the question. Thanks, Josie. Linda.
on microphone. I've gone through this. There are various small changes that I think need to be made. Most of them are stylistic. Some of them are complete omissions of a word here and there. I think I could cope with this better if I had a paper copy, if there's a spare one anywhere, and perhaps could feed those across to be considered as part of the consultation if need be. But there are one or two places where I felt a word has been missed or a word has been possibly copied wrong, and it doesn't make sense. I can tell you a few of them and you can just have a look if you like, but I feel there's a few things need tidying up.
Well, my only comment to that, Linda, is I'm sure, knowing how thorough you are, I'm sure that they can be picked up on. But I would say that myself, you know, if I want to, I didn't print out the whole document, but if I want to print something out at home, to be able to look at it and view any changes or something, then I'll print it out at home rather than ask the council, because we are supposed to be in a paperless council.
I have been doing my best to do so, but 152 pages, I just didn't think my printing facilities could cope with it in a time available.
I
So I tried, but I wasn't very
I
successful.
completely agree with you, Linda, but if you go onto the little bit that says which pages, then you can put in 1 to 9 or, you know, 20 to 25. Well, thanks, everybody. The things that Josie touched on, which I noted as far as the DFT standards policy, is that the DBS certificate, we don't feel that the 6 monthly check is currently necessary, but it's going to be reviewed as we go on. The language proficiency, the English and knowledge test, we haven't apparently had any past problems in Breckland, but once again, it's going to be reviewed as we go on. And the information and rules documents that drivers have to have, I think it's a good idea that everything's going to be combined into one document, which makes it a lot easier for them to carry around and access. And the diabetes policy, the Section 10 register, we're not currently signed up to it, but we are amending the statutory registration. If the policy goes through, we will then be signed up to it. The code of conduct, the interested use of being in Breckland area. Did I get that right?
Intended. use.
Intended use. I couldn't read my own writing. I do apologise. The DBS checks on staff by operators and the penalty points situation that will be introduced. Can I ask committee whether they are happy with the document? Everybody here? Thank you, Josie.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to go to the report, because obviously we need your permission to go out to consultation with this. So I won't obviously read all of it, but we'll just go through. So the purpose of the report is to review the draft revised taxi policy with a view to proceeding with a public consultation on the document for a 6-week period. So I would like to slightly amend the dates, if that is all right with the committee. So on page 10, 1.7, I have said that we will, obviously we're here at committee today, and that the policy would go out for consultation on the 26th. I would like it to still go out for consultation on the 26th, but we intend to have some meetings via Zoom with the trade during that week. So if at all possible, I would like your agreement that we could end it. So it would be on the 12th of September to give the drivers and the trade a full 6 weeks after we've had those meetings with them to feedback to through the consultation process, if you're happy with that. So the options available are, having regard to all the information provided, members have the option to approve the revised taxi policy and agree a public consultation for 6 weeks or 7 weeks in this case, make amendments to the revised taxi policy and agree a public consultation for 7 weeks, or do nothing. The reason for the recommendation is that the DFT standards must be considered by the authority and implemented unless there are compelling local reasons not to do so. Baroness Vere, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State, has advised these standards must be considered by January 2022. The current policy document has been revised alongside the DFT standards and in consultation with the licensing team. To do nothing would leave the council having to explain to the DfT why none of those standards have been applied and leave us with a policy that is in excess of 14 years old and no longer fit for purpose. So the expected benefits are that Breckland's a mainly rural area, and the licensed Hackney carriage and private hire drivers and operators provide a vital public service where many people do not have access to other transport provision. The revised taxi policy will give us a strong framework for making decisions, ensuring that public safety is the primary consideration when licensing individuals, vehicles, operators and proprietors. It will provide us with a fit for purpose document that allows complete transparency on how we operate the taxi licensing function. So the recommendation is that the council review the revised draft taxi policy and procedures and agree that a public consultation on the agree to a public consultation on the document for 7 weeks.
Thank you, Josie. Members, do you agree with the recommendation? Thank you, Josie. And one abstention. I'm sorry? Oh, sorry, Gordon.
Sorry, Chairman, I was just wondering if I might ask a question of Josie on that. By changing from the 5th to the 12th, is that going to in any way affect the progress through the other stages of the council, which I think is here and then full council, or does it go to cabinet as well? I know it's not an executive decision.
Still getting used to these new systems. No, it won't. To be honest, it won't have any effect. I've allowed plenty of time to look and review those any responses we have to the consultation, and we actually come back to the committee of the licensing authority on the 20th of October. So there will still be plenty of time to review all of those comments and get that all put together to come back to committee, hopefully with the for consideration for the agreement for it to be recommended to full council for adoption. So I think we're fine on time.
Are you happy with that, Gordon?
Yes.
Thank you. Members, can I ask you then if you agree with the recommendation, please? Yes. We have, and one abstention from Philip. All right, Josie?
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for going through it in such a proceed form, Josie, when it was such a long, convoluted, heavy document. If everybody's in agreement then with the licensing update, and nobody has any more questions, I'm happy.
Yes.
No, I'm happy to end the meeting then, say that the next meeting is on Wednesday, the 20th of October. Thank you very much, everyone. Switch my microphone on. Good morning. We move into the Committee of the Licensing Authority, Wednesday, the 21st of July. And the Committee of the Licensing Authority, and I will ask members if they would agree the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 21st of October back in 2020. Do we agree those minutes? I think they're agreed, Julie. Thank you. And apologies for absence. I'm going to take that we've got the same apologies as we did for the previous meeting. Do any members have any urgent business? Declarations of interest? Non-members wishing to address the meeting. Good morning, Gordon, again. And item number 6, to review the draft statement of principle of the Gambling Act 2005, pages 7 to 53. I'll hand over to Josie.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, you've got my voice again, I'm afraid. So the purpose of this report is to consider the revised statement of Principles Gambling Act 2005 prior to it being issued for consultation. Section 349 of the Gambling Act 2005 requires the Council, as the licensing authority, to prepare and publish a statement of principles, which we term as the gambling policy, that it proposes to apply in exercising its licensing function. The statement will last for a minimum of 3 years, but can be reviewed and revised by the authority at any time. This authority's current statement took effect in January 2019. So the required review process must be completed by the end of 2021 to enable publication in January 22. This report summarises the proposed amendments to the current policy. The Gambling Act 2005 places the responsibility for the licensing of gambling premises and the issuing of gambling permits with local authorities, with the associated responsibility of ensuring that the conditions on these licenses are upheld. Amongst other matters, the 2005 Act deals with the licensing of betting shops, bingo halls, amusement arcades, gaming machines, and small society lotteries. The Act requires licensing authorities to prepare, consult on, and publish a statement of licensing principles that they propose to apply in exercising their functions under the Act during the 3-year period to which the policy will be applied. Core to the Gambling Act are the licensing objectives, which are preventing gambling from being a source of crime and disorder, being associated with crime and disorder, or being used to support crime, ensuring that gambling is conducted in a fair and open manner, and protecting children and other vulnerable persons from being harmed or exploited by gambling. Section 3493 of the Gambling Act requires the licensing authority to consult the following on its licensing policy statement or any subsequent revision: the Chief Officer of Police, one or more persons who appear to be to the authority to represent interests of persons carrying on gambling businesses in the authority area, and one or more persons who appear to the authority to represent the interests of persons who are likely to be affected by the exercise of the authority's function under the Act. The list of persons to be consulted when preparing the statement of principles is deliberately wide. It enables the licensing authority to undertake a comprehensive consultation exercise with anyone who may be affected by or otherwise have an interest in the licensing policy statement. Section 154 of the Gambling Act 2005 indicates that adoption of the statement of principles cannot be delegated to the committee of the licensing authority. Therefore, full council must adopt the final document. This is different to the granting of gambling premises licenses, which the Act automatically delegates to the committee of the licensing authority. It is proposed that the council meeting on the 9th of December 2021 will consider the final version of the proposed revised policy. The timetable for the process is below. So at today's meeting, the draft amendments are to be considered by the committee of the licensing authority. And if you're happy with them, we'll go out to consultation, which will start on the 26th of July and close on the 5th of September. We will then collate the responses and come back to committee on the 20th of October for you to consider those representations and make any recommendations to revise the policy for the council to adopt it if needed. And then to go to the full council meeting on the 9th of December, hopefully for adoption by full council with the policy becoming effective on the 3rd of January 2022. We have reviewed the current statement of principles in light of experience in dealing with gambling premises and issues over the last 3 years, as well as considering the Gambling Commission guidance to licensing authorities. A copy of the draft revised statement of principles gambling policy is attached as Appendix A. There are only 3 proposed changes, which are identified below as A, B, and C on pages 8 and 9. So A is the requirement to show that the premises is ready to be used for gambling prior to applying for the premises license has been removed. This is on the recommendation of the Gambling Commission, as this was only ever guidance and they consider it no longer relevant. B is part 2A2, the list of the number of gaming machine authorizations, which has been updated with current figures for June 2021. So those are gaming machine authorizations that we currently have in place. And C, part B16, the removal of the statement that the authority is currently working towards producing a local area profile to. This authority has not produced a local area profile to date. However, this will remain under review. The options available to the committee today are limited as the process is legislative and dictated by the Gambling Act 2005. The council has no discretion as to making the statement of principles, although there is some discretion as to the content of the statement. The committee of the licensing authority are asked to review the draft policy and agree for it to be issued for consultation. The reason for recommendation is to ensure that Breckland Council, acting as the licensing authority, can meet its statutory duties under the Gambling Act 2005. I've listed all of the implications there under 5.1 to 5.8. It obviously affects all of the wards in the district. So the final recommendation is that the committee consider the proposed revised Gambling Act policy statement of principles as shown as Appendix A of this report, and basically agree for it to be issued for consultation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Josie. Do we have any questions? Philip?
Thank you. I just wondered what a local area profile was in more detail and why we don't do it. Is there?
Okay, so the local area profile was something that was introduced by the Gambling Commission about 6 years ago, and it generally affects larger city areas. So the principle behind it is that we would want to consider whether we want to put any kind of gambling premises next to a church, a primary school, those kind of establishments. We consider that as part of the application process anyhow, which is why we haven't actually set a separate document for it. So the idea of the document is that it sits there and anybody making an application to Breckland Council could view it, and then they would have to basically give reasons why they think we should move away from that. Whereas we tend to go at it from the other point of view and have a consultation with them first, have discussions with them. And to date, we've not actually had anybody apply in an area where it's next to a school or a church or something where it would be drastically affected. To be honest, we haven't had any new premises since the Gambling Act 2005 came in 2007. They were all existing at that time. So we haven't, I think that's probably the primary reason for not having it.
Any other questions? Gordon?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, with your permission, I was just going to say, backing up what Josie just said to Philip, we did look very closely at it. I made sure we looked closely at it last time because I was then sitting in your chair, and I believe we only had one street in Breckland where I thought we could legitimately have made such a case, but in the end, after looking at it, we actually couldn't make such a case. So it is something that we ought to keep there and keep looking at. But I don't think we're in a position at the moment to have any area that we could so signify as being excluded from additional development. I mean, there is that one street in Thetford, which I hope you'd look very closely at if there was an application for that street or just round the corner from it.
If I may just let you know, one of those betting premises has actually surrendered their license, so there now is only 2 on that particular street. What we are also seeing nationally is a move away from physical premises where people go and place bets to online. I'm sure you've all sat there watching TV of an evening and seen the number of gambling betting promotions that are on there of online websites and things like that. There's obviously a big move towards those, and betting shops are actually struggling and have been, obviously, because they have been greatly closed for many periods of the lockdowns that we've had. So we are seeing a move away from actual physical premises.
Happy with that, Gordon?
Yes, I am happy with that. And I agree. I mean, I'm appalled when I sit and watch television at the number of adverts on, and it's even now gambling on online has even moved into the charity area, which I think is a great pity. And I would also commend anyone who on this committee who has never been in a betting shop to wander in and enjoy one of their free cups of tea. Not to place the bet, and if you're allowed to stand there for an hour and watch what happens, it is quite interesting.
Yes, thank you, Gordon. It is. Members, I won't run through the recommendations, but I'll move to 3.0, the reason for the recommendation, to ensure that Breckland Council, acting as the licensing authority, can meet its statutory duties under the Gambling Act 2005. Do you agree to the recommendation? Thank you, Josie. Oh, we, Philip.
Sorry.
We're all getting used to the new system, Philip. Thank you very much. Is that all right, Julie? Yep. So I'm just going to touch on that. Is that all right? Members, I'd just like to touch on, before we go on to the training requirements, a letter from the Institute of Licensing, the Nighttime Industries Association, the NTIA, which was sent to the chairman of all licensing committees. And it says, "Dear Council, the coronavirus pandemic has caused unprecedented disruption and hardship since March 2020. The impacts have affected many businesses and the hospitality industry in particular, with limited opportunities to react and adapt. As we emerge from this exceptionally difficult time, many of these impacts will continue. One of the key problems that hospitality businesses now face is the lack of resources, including staff. This is a particularly serious problem when it comes to complying with license conditions that depend upon staff resources. The nighttime economy is in the middle of a particular crisis concerning security professionals. There's a grave shortage of security staff available for work, and this has been compounded by more stringent new training standards introduced by the Security Authority for those wishing to enter. Even the limited numbers coming forward to qualify are too often failing to do so. Often, the numbers are simply just not there to serve full license requirements, and there is nothing that the security industry or the licensees can do about it. This problem is not going to go away. The government recently announced its consultation on the duty to protect. This aspiration to increase security provision in the public and private sector is only going to deepen the crisis. We are writing to you at this time to make you aware of the issues and to ask that you take them into account in making case-by-case licensing decisions. On the 8th of April 2020, Kit Morehouse, the Minister of State for Crime and Policing, wrote to the chairs of licensing committees to invite them to take a pragmatic and more flexible approach to licensing while the outbreak was ongoing. He said retailers may be operating under licenses for conditions that may prove difficult to comply with in the current period due to absenteeism. These include, but are not limited to, conditions that mandate the minimum number of staff or door supervisors on site, training requirements, or attending external meetings. A considered and pragmatic approach should be taken to breaches of licensing conditions and procedural defects caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly where these breaches or defects do not have a significant adverse impact on the licensing objectives. License holders must rectify any breaches as soon as is reasonably practical. This continues to be very important, even as we emerge from the worst restrictions on the pandemic. Partnership working with businesses to allow them to recover and make their contribution to the economy has never been more important. We hope that highlighting this crisis will assist in making informed and proportionate decisions. And it's signed by Daniel Davis, the chairman of the Institute of Licensing, and Michael Kill, the Chief Executive, Nighttime Industries Association Chairperson of the UK door security industry. So I just thought that that might be helpful to you all. If you have any questions, I'm quite sure that Josie will be happy to answer them. No? Thank you very much, Josie. We'll move on to item Philip.
A bit slow, really. I was thinking this through. I mean, I think we all want to take a pragmatic approach to coming out of lockdown, but it is important to maintain standards. So I'm sort of a little torn and not sure how, if we're getting people who are not adhering strictly to the licensing laws, how we behave, how we view that. It is a little bit of a mixed message, and I suppose we'll just have to find out what comes forward.
I'll hand you over to Josie, Philip, but I think it's, as was said earlier, the team are very efficient on going out to visit premises where any concerns are raised by either members or members of the public, and on an advisory basis, they will be supporting the premises, and it will be up to their professionalism as to what steps need to be taken by the council for any breaches of any licensing objectives that may be happening. But I'll let Josie finish up.
Thank you, Chairman. So I don't know if it puts your mind at rest or not, but I had a meeting with the Norfolk Police yesterday and the other local authorities for licensing. The police did advise, and we have known for some time, that the 4 main companies in the county that do the SIA door staff are having very, very big recruiting problems. There really are very large shortages of door staff, not just in Norfolk, but also nationwide. Obviously, many of those people who were door staff previously, earning quite a good living, because obviously all the clubs and things were open, have moved on and had to take other work during the lockdowns and during the COVID period. However, the police have said they are going to take a very pragmatic approach to it and work with license holders. They are looking for license holders to mitigate any issues that they have by not getting being able to get door staff through their risk assessments and making their judgment calls through that. So the idea being that if they know they can't get SIA door staff, they may need to finish early. They may need to mitigate that off in some other way by reducing the numbers, or they may just decide to stick to table service, which we know some premises are doing. They haven't actually, although we've got the big opening up, they haven't actually removed the COVID restrictions and by choice themselves. So we have 4 primary nighttime venues in the Breckland area. 2 of those are in Dereham, 1 is in Attleborough and 1 is in Thetford. One of the ones in Dereham actually runs, I believe, his own door staff business. So he obviously has maintained and retained his door staff during the COVID outbreak. The other one is returning to bar service. So you can go to the bar and get your drinks, but is going to adhere to having the door staff on and reduce the amount of hours that they are opening if he can't get the bar staff. The bar in Attleborough has said that, again, if he can't get the SIA door staff, he will close early and he will work with the police on that. And the one in Thetford, I haven't been able to get any information from, but they are on the police radar. So the police are aware of our 4 venues that are our primary nightclubs in inverted commas, if that's the term you wish to use. And they are, obviously there's a big reopening. The police are going to be incredibly busy at the weekend. They have put on additional resources for that, because obviously we're anticipating a big opening weekend this weekend. So resources are there. We've been assured that resources can be diverted from Norwich to elsewhere in the county as and when required over this coming weekend. And I think the police are more than geared up for it. I was quite pleased with the way they were viewing this. We will work alongside the police in helping venues look at the conditions on their licence around SIA door staff, to see what can be done for them, whether there's a case of they've reduced the numbers, therefore they don't need so many. So we will be taking a pragmatic approach to it, but paramount is the public safety and always will be.
Thank you, Josie. I think the effect of the pandemic, Philip, on many different trade aspects has been absolutely enormous. I was told last week something that I actually didn't have any idea about by a new licensee who is desperately trying to find a full-time chef. there's a massive shortage of chefs in the country. And what he said was that because of many of them not being furloughed, being laid off, had to go and find other jobs, and actually found that the hours were better, and in many cases that the pay was better than being a chef, and they're not coming back. And when he told me the horrendous amount of money that is being asked for by people in many cases to be full-time chefs, he's very worried that he might not be able to find one, and so he's actually doing the cooking himself at the moment. But are you happy with what Josie said, Philip?
Thank you. I'm partly content, but I do feel we don't want to be relaxing standards. And you've answered part of my feeling is that people who were door staff before, I'm sure if the money is right, they will come back to that. You know, they are still out there. Some may have left because of Brexit, and I think that's certainly happening in the catering industry, but that will have to come forward. People will have to move into those shoes and satisfy the job requirements.
Well, as I've always said, Philip, that members of the council and members of the public are our eyes and ears, and it is going to be quite challenging in the next couple of weeks as places open up and relax the conditions. So I would just encourage people that if they've got any concerns, that they will bring them forward to me or the team. Thank you. Any other questions for Josie? Oh, switch my green light. No, I need to put it back on again. Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item 8, which is training requirements. And just before we get into the general discussion, I'm sure that some of you might be aware that I'm very, very pleased to confirm that James Button Associates have been taken on by the council as our licensing advisors. James Button is a solicitor who is an advisor to the Institute of Licensing. He's done training sessions for the council before, and the feedback that I've had from members from that training from him is extremely good. And we're looking at the moment to setting up some training sessions with James in the autumn. And I'm pretty sure that everybody will find them extraordinarily helpful, stimulating and informative. But now I'll hand you over to.
Thank you, Chairman. I feel like I've talked a lot this morning, so apologies for that. Yes, you're absolutely correct. We have taken on membership of James Button and Associates again. We have access to Jim's great wealth of knowledge with taxi licensing and the Licensing Act, which is going to be a massive help going forward. We are looking, the proposal is for 2 half days of training in September, October time, once you come back from recess. The first one we would hope would be on committees, making decisions, asking questions, and primarily the Licensing Act 2003. And the second half day would be on taxi licensing, because we know how difficult it can be when you've got drivers or operators in front of you sometimes, what questions to ask. Where does it go when it goes to appeal? And Jim will be very, very good at giving you all of that information and training on that. So the proposal is to have those 2 half days. Obviously, it has to go through the right channels for member training. And I believe the vice chair knows about that kind of thing, having previously been, I think, the chair on that one, haven't you? So yeah, we're looking at that at the moment. Be contacting James Button and Associates this week to try and get those 2 half days and get some dates for those and get that booked in for you. So I hope that that will be of some benefit for you. There's also a proposal to do some mock hearings for you going forward as well with members of staff to try and just give you a little bit of experience. We've done it previously at another authority that I was at, and it was received quite well. It's quite informal, but we think it's there as a good learning tool. It just gives you some ideas of some dodgy characters you might get before you. Of course, they're not dodgy, but some of the questions that you might need to ask it, you know, and it's in a more informal setting. So the idea would be that you can ask questions and no question will be too stupid to ask, kind of thing. Just to give you some experience of that, because we know not everybody has had the opportunity to sit on panels over the last couple of years, and particularly the last 18 months in particular. So that's the proposal going forward, if everybody's happy with that.
Yes, very happy, Josie. And for the new members that we've got on board in the last couple of years, who haven't had the benefit of Jim's training, I'm sure that they'll find it very interesting indeed. Do you have any questions, Tina?
Yeah, the licensing training that we had at the very beginning of when we got onto the council in the very, very early days, that used to be on the members page. It's not there now. So I have asked MDP to have a look to see if we can get that back. It just gives an overarching basic level, but that would be helpful to try and get that back out there, just so, you know, it's like the 4 objectives of licensing, what is licensed, what isn't, that sort of thing. That would be quite helpful to compound it. It's like the basics, isn't it? Like your times table of licensing, if you like. But that would be quite nice to just to reiterate it. To some that might be, oh, been there, done that. But to others that might be just, you know, just forgotten that bit. Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Do we have any other questions for Josie? No? We'll move on to item 9, which is feedback and discussion on recent panel meetings. I think we've only had one, Josie, haven't we?
There's been 2 in the pandemic.
Only
one recently.
Yeah, I was going to say I couldn't remember. So is there anything that you want to tell the committee about those, Josie?
No, I don't think I have anything. I wasn't at the last panel hearing, which was a few weeks ago. We're just waiting to hear whether or not they're going to appeal the decision. But other than that, I think we only had the one last year and that was granted, wasn't it? So yeah, really, there's no feedback on that. I think things went well. I think obviously we're just getting back into using IT and everything. So hopefully things will be a lot smoother going forward. But I think it went well. I think, yeah, there's no other feedback to give on that.
Thank you. Before I end the meeting, I'd just like to briefly run through the last 18 months, which, because it seems to have gone on forever, and there's been so much going on. One could say, thank heavens for Zoom, or one could say, oh goodness me, thank heavens we haven't got to do it anymore. But like everybody else in the team the team had to set up and work from home, and the logistics of how they would continue to issue licenses had to be sorted. The posts were scanned and emailed, and visits to the office were few, just to print and post licenses, plates, badges, and reminder letters. Zoom and WhatsApp meant the team could inspect vehicles and check identification documents and offer virtual assistance with filling in forms. Drivers started having problems getting an appointment for their medicals. So a 6-month self-declaration was offered where there had been no significant change in medical circumstances. DV4 drivers was offered as an option for drivers, allowing them to access to a service providing Group 2 medicals. I think they're in Norwich, aren't they, Josie?
They're all over the country.
Oh, right. With a fully qualified medical professional, this has been greatly improved accessibility to driver medicals, not only during working hours, but also in the evening and on the weekend. Taxi testing garages have remained open in the main during the COVID period. So compliance tests have remained in place. Vehicles had to remain roadworthy for the safety of the public. Driving tests were suspended by government during the lockdowns. So to enable new drivers to get their taxi driving tests as soon as things reopened, a new provider was added to the list, Blue Lamp Trust. The team issued guidance on what types of screen dividers could be used in taxis, as well as guidance on COVID safety measures for cleaning and using masks in taxis. During the changes the government made with the tier system, support and advice was provided to the licensed trade, and the team worked with other departments in the council to help support businesses, such as the food team, COVID team, and regeneration team, etc. Multi-agency working has continued throughout the pandemic. The team have worked with partner agencies throughout the different levels of restrictions being lifted, looking at where additional resources for compliance might be needed at events and venues to ensure safety of the public. The government made many changes to legislation to assist businesses, such as pavement licenses for tables and chairs, the sale of food and drink from outside the businesses, and off sales and delivery of food and alcohol. The team have been there every step of the way, advising and assisting those businesses trying to find alternative ways of continuing to trade. Unsurprisingly, the number of temporary events dropped dramatically last year. There appears to be a return to normal numbers since May of this year. In the main, these are private weddings, parties, and village fêtes. The team have continued to forward event notifications to the Safety Advisory Group. Many events were cancelled last year. Events such as the Buckingham Air Show are taking place this year, but with reduced capacity, even though restrictions have been lifted. The team is engaging with partner agencies on these events. In the last 18 months, the team have received 25 premises license applications. 24 were granted and 1 refused. This fact surprised the team. We think this shows that there is continued belief in new business startups despite the pandemic. 15 premises licenses have been surrendered during the period. 3 have new licenses in place, surrendering the redundant license. The others have closed completely. Those closed include a takeaway, B&B, pop-up bar, boat, florist, and 4 pubs. Of course, the other areas of licensing have continued: scrap metal, gambling, and animal licensing, etc. The team change. All posts are seconded or on a fixed term, as a review of the whole environmental health department is to be undertaken by the end of the year. Josie is the team leader. Laura and Lisa split the licensing officer post, filling their remaining time as assistant officers. Julie joined as a part-time assistant officer, and Al joined the team as part-time animal licensing officer. While all this has been happening, the team have been getting to grips with a new IT software system, migrating and amending data on over 4,000 licenses. This work continues with the additional resource of 1 agency staff member dedicated solely to this. So on reflection, a very, very busy time, no less busy than pre-pandemic, even though the focus was definitely different. So thank you very much, everyone. And on that rather lengthy report, no, it was absolutely excellent, Josie, and I would like it if you would pass on our thanks from the committee to the officers for the amazing amount of work that they had to contend with, as well as morphing into other jobs as well, and to you. So thanks, Josie.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have 2 very quick updates. One of them is to actually just let you know what's happening with pavement licenses. So that was something that was introduced under the Business and Planning Act 2020 to fast track basically tables and chairs and the sale of goods in cafes and restaurants. So it wasn't for shops, which got a little bit confusing at one stage. The government are looking to extend that under an amendment to the Business and Planning Act. It still has to be debated in both houses of Parliament. And it's also expected that off sales that were included in that original Business and Planning Act to allow any premises that has on sales of alcohol to have off sales without automatically having or without having it on their license already, for that to be extended. The period they want to extend it to is from the end of September this year to the end of September 22 to allow businesses that additional time. So we're waiting on the detail of that because obviously, as you can understand, it probably won't happen until about the 15th of September or the 29th. So we're just waiting to hear on that. And then the only other thing really to update you on is the Animal Welfare Bill from DEFRA, which is known as the Kept Animals Bill. This is to protect pets, livestock and wild animals. There's 5 key areas they're looking at. The first one is puppy smuggling. They're looking at new powers to tackle unethical trade of puppy smuggling by reducing the number of pets, and that's dogs, cats and ferrets that can travel under pet rules, and increase the minimum age of imported puppies, and also restrict the import of pregnant dogs and dogs with cropped ears and tails going forward. They're also looking at live exports, which obviously doesn't affect us too badly, and also the banning of keeping primates as pets. The fourth one is livestock worrying. They're looking to give new powers to the police to protect livestock from dangerous or out of control dogs. That protection will extend, hopefully, to llamas, ostriches and game birds. And then the final one they're looking at is zoos, that the Zoo Licensing Act will be amended to improve zoo regulations and ensure zoos are doing more to contribute to conservation. So it's just a bit of an animal feel there to follow on from where we started the meeting. So thank you for that, Chairman.
Thank you, Josie, for that update. That's very, very interesting. And I hope that the bill does get passed. I really, really do. The other thing, which is nothing to do with us, but with these new powers that are coming forward, I just hope that with various cases of cruelty, especially, that it's only my personal feeling that I hope that the courts actually are very, very robust in their sentencing on animal cruelty, which has reached ridiculous heights. Anybody have any questions for Josie? Gordon?
No, Chairman, except thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate that. I do perhaps just would like to underline what you said about James Button. I think it's very pleasing that he is back on the Breckland radar, and I'm sure he'll be very useful to Josie and the other officers, as well as to you and members of this committee. I do hope when the training comes up, everybody will attend. I think it's absolutely important that everybody in licensing and you in this committee are Breckland licensing. It doesn't go any wider than that. It's always worth remembering that with this particular committee. I hope everyone will go because we all have to keep up to date with licensing. I will probably be applying to see whether I can come myself as well, because James Button training is a little bit different from anything else you've ever experienced. You will come out knowing a great deal more than you believed you learned when you were in there. And it'll give you a foundation in licensing which will last a lifetime. But it will be a 2021 version and not a 1991 version. So I think that's good. And I was pleased to attend that last panel. It was interesting, and I think it pointed out a few things. So that's something that we really do need to be looking at as a council. Mainly, of course, that will have to be led by the chairman of licensing, because that's the person who we all look to. So thank you, Marion.
Thank you, Gordon. Your input is always appreciated. I would just like to say that as far as the training is concerned, that although we can't make it mandatory, I will, when we send out the the letter of invitation, make it quite clear that unless members do attend the training session, that they will not be eligible to go onto any licensing panels.
I would absolutely support that. With licensing, we're doing two things. We're making a decision on a person or a family's livelihood on the one hand, and we're protecting the public on the other hand. And, you know, we all need to be well used to balancing those two positions to come to the right decision for the communities that we all sitting around this room represent.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that, please. Thank you, Marion. I think on being on a panel, it's a big responsibility, as Gordon has said, and I think we need to be very clued up with current legislation and rules and regulations. As you say, these are people's lives and livelihoods, and we need to be aware of what we're handling. So I think, yeah, I really echo that we need to go on the training to be on the panels. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much, committee. Josie, have you got anything else you want to add?
No, I would just like to say thank you for your support during the COVID period. It's been great to have contact with you and for your support with the animal licensing officer post, because we wouldn't have that if you weren't backing us every step of the way with that one. So thank you very much for that. I really do appreciate it. Al has made some great inroads already. I will just quickly mention one thing that he didn't mention while he was here. Al has found a way legally of stopping adverts on Pets for Homes if people are advertising who are not licensed, and also on Gumtree, and we are now looking at avenues of other advertising avenues, if you like, of where we can do that legally through GDPR and all the other types of data protection hoops that we have to do. And he has made some great inroads in that, and it's quite surprising the response you get from the people who are advertising. But just to let you know, he is doing a very good job, but that we are able to use that. And I think it's something that you probably need to know, and people out there need to know, that actually we can close down adverts on these sites if people are not licensed and do require one. So it's good news for us. So thank you for your support in getting him into the post. I really do appreciate it. It's made a big difference to the team and the work we can do.
Thank you, Josie. Well, in the short time that he's been with Breckland Council, he's made enormous inroads, doing a tremendous amount of work, and supporting the licensing team, and letting them get on with their day job, and with his focus and his experience in all aspects of animal welfare and enforcement. I think the council are very lucky to have had such an applicant. And if nobody else has any questions, I'm happy to close the meeting and say that our next meeting is on the 20th of October, 2021 at 10 o'clock after the licensing meeting. So